Hi, my name is Milfa Blamo, and my topic that I chose to present on is health and environmental effects of air pollution. I chose this topic because it's kind of close to home. We have a 7.5-year-old son that was diagnosed with asthma a couple years ago, and I was forced almost to start researching on this issue and just the impacts of it on our children and on adults in general. So what I'm going to present, I'll begin with giving a history or a brief background, I should say, on air pollution, what air pollution is. Then I will discuss the environmental impact. Then I will go into presenting on the health impact on adults and also the health impact on children because they are different. And then I will conclude by telling you a little bit about the Clean Air Act, which was created or proposed, if you will, to combat air pollution in the United States. What is air pollution? Air pollution occurs when the air contains gases, dust, fumes, or odors in harmful amounts. Now, generally, any substance that people introduce into the atmosphere that has damaging effects on living things and the environment is considered to be air pollution. So you think about carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas. That's the main pollutant that's currently warming the earth. Other greenhouse gases include methane, and that comes from swamps and gas from livestock. There's also CFCs or chlorofluorocarbons, I should say. They were used in the past in refrigerants and aerosol propellants, if you can recall. They were banned because of their deteriorating effects on the Earth's ozone layer. Next, we will discuss, or I'll present on, the environmental impact of air pollution. Beginning with acidic rain. Acidic rain can cause damage to plants, animals, trees, and other wildlife. I spoke earlier about CFCs, that being another form of air pollution. That can cause harmful effects to the ozone layer. Now, as we all know, the ozone layer protects us from ultraviolet radiation. And this again can cause damaging effects to plants and our wildlife. So it's it has a pretty significant impact on our environment and our habitat. Our planet is currently warming much more rapidly than expected because of additional greenhouse gases that are being released into the air or into the atmosphere from air pollution. Now I'll talk a little bit about the primary sources of the primary air pollutants and secondary air pollutants. I chose to include this pie chart because it depicts just the different pollutants, the more significant ones, if you will. The most significant pollutant or the most significant air pollutant would be, or primary air pollutant would be carbon monoxide, as I alluded to earlier. That's about 38% of all air pollutants. Then you have particulate matter that would fall behind that at 36%. And then there's other ones that are coming in at a little smaller percentage. Sulfur oxides, nitrogen oxides, and the volatile organic compounds that are less significant, but still primary air pollutants here in the United States. So I thought it was just important to point those out. Now this next picture, it's not really a graph per se, but I think it paints a clear picture, and it's a good graphical expression of the different types of pollutants. As I mentioned earlier, there's the primary, which are a little bit more significant, and then the secondary pollutants. And it shows kind of where they stem, from factories, from vehicles, shipping yards, towns and homes. And it just kind of shows kind of how they all, physically go into the air and the impact that they have. So speaking about the impact that air pollution has, we'll start with adults. Now, obviously, adults are a little bit older, and so our bodies are a little bit more developed and a little bit more mature. But at the same time, too much exposure to air pollution can cause heart and lung disease. In fact, a recent study estimated that approximately 64,000 people in the US die prematurely from heart and lung disease every year due to particulate air pollution. Now, according to the research that I did and what I read, that's more people than those that die in car accidents each year. I found that to be rather alarming, but it just shows how significant of an issue that this truly is. It also causes alertness and vision impairments. Now, as you would imagine, there are certain adults that work in different professions that are more, exposed to some air pollutants than others. And those types of exposures would be the ones that would cause impairments over time to their lungs and their heart function. Definitely, we know that exposure to carbon monoxide by adults can cause mental illnesses. And, that has been proven. And there's some ongoing research on that as well. And then I found also in my research that photochemical oxidants can affect the lungs and again, the vision in most cases. So now let's look at the health impact on children, because as I said before, it's a little different, with children being a little more susceptible because their lungs aren't fully developed. Children represent the largest subgroup of the population susceptible to the effects of air pollution. Now, among children, air pollutants are associated with increased acute respiratory illnesses. So you think about asthma, like I mentioned about my son Milton. He started having like respiratory infections, and then gradually it led to that. And so it just made us as parents, my husband and I, just kind of more aware of our surrounding, more of our environment. We were not smokers, but just, the fact that we had exposed him to different environments and what have you. Common air pollutants, especially ozone, sulfur dioxide, and particulate matter, present a real challenge to those with asthma. The Clean Air Act was adopted back in 1970. It was actually created back in 1970, I should say, by the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, and their role was to carry out the Clean Air Act and the policy. And basically at that point, they were responding to some fog issues and some just developing issues around air pollution. But it's gone now on a federal level, and they have asked the different states to have different plans in place and different policies in place. And the Clean Air Act includes emission levels controls. And I just wanted to note that, so as we think about the different emission levels, in 1990, the Clean Air Act was expanded to include air pollution emissions. That's when that started. Under the Clean Air Act, the EPA set limits on certain air pollutants, including setting limits on how much can be in the air at any given point in time. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you for tuning in, and I would hope that the information that I have presented here today would make you a little bit more aware of your environment and your surrounding, and that we need to protect our environment as a community and as citizens of the United States. Thank you.